Hello and good morning. I am making this video on Thursday, September 11th, 2025. And the reason I'm making this video is because I'm feeling very lucid right now. And I feel like my thoughts are sort of flowing to me. And I feel like my ability to speak and my ability to form thoughts is working very well right now. And there are times where that doesn't work super well for me, and I have a very hard time formulating what I want to say. And so because I am feeling so able to, I want to take this chance while I can, because I feel like too often I try to do this type of thing and record, sort of like in my one video about Avril Lavigne and Ash Nico's song, Skater Boy and Later Boy respectively. One second, I have to clear my throat. Sorry, I cleared my throat. But in that video, I had a very hard time thinking about what I wanted to say next, and there is a lot of pausing, and I said and that sort of thing quite a bit. And right now, I feel like I can speak without doing that. I feel like I can speak without using like as much as I regularly do. And anyway, the thing that I wanted to talk about in this video is my narcissistic tendencies and how I believe that they kind of formed. I have a mixed opinion about the term narcissist and narcissism. And first of all, I believe that everybody has narcissistic tendencies, no matter how good of a person someone is, no matter how selfless someone is, no matter how somebody is, good or bad. I think everybody has some narcissistic tendencies. So I don't really think it is a big deal to call out the ones that you might possess. And so I also don't think that I should feel bad about myself, because I'm aware that I possess these traits. But I also think that if enough tendencies present themselves together in one person, obviously once behavior starts to be problematic or causes problems for other people, or just that individual, I think that it should be dealt with. But I just don't feel like even people who are full out narcissistic and have narcissistic personality disorder, I just don't feel like the stigmatism towards that is very good or very nice. And so I'm just kind of trying to say here, before I kind of go on, that I don't think that there's anything quote unquote wrong with people with narcissistic personality disorder, and I don't think there's anything wrong with people like me who have narcissistic tendencies. I think it's wrong to use it as an excuse to hurt other people, or to make choices that negatively impact other people's lives, like stealing money from parents and stuff like that. And I do think that narcissistic thinking makes it easier to make bad choices like stealing from someone's parents, because a narcissistic person feels as though they are different, and a lot of the time one of the ways that they feel different is they feel that rules apply to other people but not to them. But at the same time, I think that, like, it's not the exact same, but some people kind of have the opposite, where they are laser focused and feel like they can't break any rules, and they are very set on following things as best they can. And I'm kind of like this, but then other people can do whatever they want, and even if it gets you involved, there are some people who don't feel comfortable criticizing other people whatsoever. Anyway, when I was about, I believe, 10 or 11 years old, because I had started hunting season, I went with my grandfather hunting for the first time when I was 8 years old. And I think it was the second or third year that I went hunting with him. And we were driving back from his hunting land. He owned 40 acres. And then my uncle owned, his brother, my great uncle, owned 40 acres. And so we hunted there. Whitetail deer hunting. Anyway, my grandfather complained about almost everyone in my family all the time. And the rest of my family also complained about the rest of my family. Like, everybody was constantly talking shit about each other. And so, as a small child, I didn't really understand why. And I also didn't really understand that it wasn't appropriate. And so I would go and I would talk about what I heard throughout to members of the family, throughout the family. And there was a couple of times where that caused, like, arguments and stuff. Like, I have a very Christian aunt where she really isn't Christian by the way that she lives. Like, she doesn't follow the principles or anything like that, and she is a very hateful, mean person. But she's the type that uses her religion to elevate herself above others. She believes herself to be better than everybody else because she is a believer. And if you're not a Christian, she actually, like, does not respect you, which I feel like is an issue, because if you're going to expect everyone to respect you automatically just because you're a person, and, you know, even if people don't agree with your religion, you think they should have to respect your religion, but then you're not going to respect someone as a person. I have a big problem with that, and I've never gotten along with her even as a kid. And anyway, that was, like, just a random, I really don't like her, so that was just a random side note. But I have an uncle who is her brother, and these are my grandfather's siblings. And my uncle, her brother, my grandpa's brother also, doesn't believe in God. He's non-religious. I think he's atheist. And he told her a long time ago that she's stupid for believing in a silly little man up in the clouds that can change the weather. And I don't even really know exactly what he said to her other than the part about being up in the clouds. And she had told me about that when I was very little, like when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old. And I was raised, Lutheran. Like, I believed in Jesus and God and all that stuff. And as a 4 or 5-year-old, I was very concerned for my great uncle after my great aunt told me that he doesn't believe in God. And I know as a child, or, I believe as a child that if you don't believe in God, you go to hell when you die. And hell isn't good. And, I got concerned, and I asked at a family reunion if it was true that my uncle didn't believe in God. And my grandfather was like, "Where did you hear that?" And I told him, my aunt, and an entire family fight started over that because my uncle got really upset that my aunt was talking about him at all like that, but especially to like me as a very young child. And then some of the adults were all mad at me because I should have known better than to say anything, and they thought that I was purposely trying to cause an issue. And which I just like, yeah, that was, I was just, they treated me like I was pretty stupid my entire life, but then they would accuse me of things like that at 4 or 5 years old. Like, yeah, anyway. And then my aunt felt justified because she felt like he should have never told her that about her religion and her beliefs. And she thinks it's time that we all put the family puts their foot down and tells him how bad that is. She's an eternal victim also. Like, no matter what she does in a situation, no matter, like, she's always the good person. She's a martyr. She's just a martyr, I guess. Like, I think that's the best way to describe it. She's a covert narcissist. Anyway, my mom and her boyfriend constantly were fighting when I was young. And there is one time where they literally had a screaming match about whether or not I like mayo or Miracle Whip more. And they both grabbed a spoon. My mom said I liked mayo more. Her boyfriend said I liked Miracle Whip more. And they made me eat a bite of each off of a spoon, just plain. And I had to pick which I liked more. And I think because Miracle Whip has more sugar, I picked Miracle Whip. And my mom acted like I betrayed her because I picked the one that her boyfriend said I liked more. And I was a kid and I didn't I was 7 because I was in 2nd grade. And I didn't know, I didn't understand just exactly how weird that was. And anyway, with all of the chaos and everything else, I empathized with the different members of my family. And as a child, my family members would talk to me about their lives and about their histories, and they would talk about each other. And so as a child, I kind of pieced it all together in my own way. And I did my best to understand everybody because as a child, I didn't have any ill will in my heart. I didn't have hatred in my heart. My aunt was my aunt. My uncle was my uncle. My grandpa was my grandpa. And the rest of them, because I had a few uncles and aunts, great uncles and aunts, because they were all my grandpa's siblings. My mom and her sister, I I feel like my mom tried to kind of put a negative opinion about my aunt into our heads growing up a bit, because my mom would talk about how just hard it was growing up with my aunt, and how much attention my aunt hogged for my grandparents when they were growing up, and how my I don't know, like just stuff like that. And my mom also constantly talked negatively about my grandmother and told us a lot of exaggerated recounts. I don't know. My mom exaggerated her upbringing a lot, and she exaggerated the way that my grandmother was a lot. And I didn't really know that until I was a teenager, and I heard it from like my mom's sister, my aunt. My grandma talked about it a bit more. I heard conversations between my mom and my grandmother where they talked about things, and my mom often tried to plant negative seeds in mine and my sister's heads about our family members. And I think it was partially because my mom was just very immature, and she would speak to us once we were able to understand. So, like, you know, by the time we were 10 years old, our mom would speak to us as if we were fully aware of the world, as if we were much older. And it was because of that I kind of started to think about my family, like, why can't they get along? I didn't understand why they had so little understanding for each other. I didn't understand why they always told me and my younger siblings to get along, and they told me and my one cousin, who, like, we really didn't like each other growing up. And they would always, you know, tell us that we have to get along and put aside our differences, but then they as adults could never put aside their differences. They could never let go of grudges, and they could never take accountability. They could never say that they were sorry. And basically, people in my family would just stop talking to each other for months, and then after it blew over enough and everyone felt comfortable enough to just, like, not speak on it again, then eventually, like, people would come back around for different family functions or whatever else. And I remember I was 10 years old, back to the hunting season part, and my grandfather and I had gotten done for the day with hunting, and we went to my great-grandmother's house, his mother's house, and we were meeting family for dinner. We were only eating dinner with my great-grandmother, my great-grandfather, and then, like, one other person that was there that day. But, my grandfather was very annoyed at his brother at the time, because his brother at the time was like 40 something years old and had just moved out of my great grandmother's house. And when we were up hunting, my uncle also was up at the land because that's where he lived. And my uncle was bitching about my great-grandparents kicking him out because he wasn't willing to pay a bill. And he was going on and on about how they don't need that money. They've got plenty of it. They don't need my money. And my grandfather was really annoyed with him, and I don't know if my grandfather said something to him, maybe he did, but on the way back, my grandfather just was complaining and complaining and complaining about my uncle, and how my uncle lived with my great-grandparents until he was effing, in his 40s, and he can't even help them out and pay a bill and all this other stuff. And I spoke up eventually and was like, yeah, like, you have to work, you have to have a job, you have to pay your bills. And my grandfather was like, see, Michael, and you as a 10-year-old boy understand that better and have a better work ethic than a 40-something-year-old man. And I remember a bit later, my grandfather left me in the car alone and had to go back into my grandmother's when we were leaving. And while he was in there, I kind of just started to think about my uncle and other people in my family. And I started to get this feeling that they aren't able to think the way that I do. And I can't really explain it a whole lot other than, like, I started to imagine different members of my family going through school. Because, I was in school at the time. I think I would have been in, like, elementary school. I would have been in, like, 5th grade or 6th grade. But I think this was 5th grade. I'm pretty sure that this was 5th grade. And I just kind of started to imagine them in school and, like, taking a test and trying to answer the questions on a test. And I genuinely didn't feel like most of the members in my family would be able to do it. I genuinely felt like they wouldn't be able to, like, go to school. I was like, just the way that they act and behave, and even the way that I even thought about their logic. Like, I genuinely just sort of felt like my family couldn't do what I could do. Because, and then that's the thing, I got along with people in my family because I was a kid. So, like, when people in my family talked badly about each other, I didn't understand the bad intent. I didn't understand anything. So I just was, I was just trying to be a good kid for everyone. I was just trying to interact with my family the way that a child does, Oh, you're my aunt, you're my uncle, you're my grandpa, you're my grandma, you're my cousin, you're, depending on whatever relationship that is, I'm going to be a child, and back then I was going to be a child, and I had that respect, I had that admiration for my family members. And I kind of, like, held on to that admiration, even though I felt like they couldn't think the way that I could think, because I didn't understand why they didn't understand each other, or, like I said, have more understanding for each other. I still, like, saw them all as individuals. I always saw my family members as, like, unique, special individuals. And I always was trying to learn more about them. I was always trying to understand them better, trying to learn more about their histories. And the thing about my family members is a lot of them are very narcissistic, or at the very least have a lot of narcissistic tendencies. And so, a lot of them, like my mom exaggerating her upbringing and claiming that she had to dust every single individual leaf of my grandmother's plants, which later on my aunt was like, no, and my grandmother was like, no. And my mom also claimed that my grandma would make them use their own toothbrushes to scrub the grout on the floor. Eventually, as a teenager, I asked my grandma about that, and my grandma was like, yeah, they're old toothbrushes. I never made them scrub the floor and then wash their mouth with the same toothbrush, but that's the way that my mom made it sound when I was growing up. And the rest of my family did the same kinds of things. And my family would repeat that kind of stuff and those kinds of stories so much that even if you knew it wasn't really true, it was just easier to let them tell a story the way that they wanted to tell it than trying to correct them or interject, because they would all of them, they'll act as if like, oh, are you sure? Because I don't think so. I remember this. I remember that. And they'll gaslight you. They'll straight up gaslight you. And I think that's part of it too. Like, I just felt different than my family, and like, I didn't feel like I was better than my family, but I just, that was my way of understanding their behavior. That was my way of understanding why they acted the way they acted, was by justifying it, by just saying that they weren't capable. And so because of that, I started to kind of believe that about the rest of the world. And I started to kind of believe that a lot of other people aren't as capable as me. And it's not that I really thought that everyone else was worse than me or anything. I just started to believe that I was one of the more capable people in this world. I started to believe that my capabilities surpassed most other people. And so because of that, I never felt like I was better than other people, but I started to kind of develop narcissistic tendencies. And I used to be a lot more self-absorbed than I am now. But I think that's partially because I had to be. But while I might have been self-absorbed and whatever, one thing that you can never say about me is that I'm lazy, or that I was lazy. I do struggle with my executive function, because that's something that people with ADHD struggle with. And starting tasks that I don't feel like doing is so hard for me. Like, or even if I want to do it, but starting is just like not my favorite thing. It's hard. But I force myself to do it. And then that's another thing with my family is, I think my family, a lot of them struggle with depression, probably undiagnosed ADD and ADHD and stuff like that. And a lot of my family struggles with starting things and also finishing things and all that. And I'm one of the only people in my family that graduated with a GPA that was above a 3.0. Most of my family, like, barely graduates. And so, I mean, that's kind of changing with, like, the newer generation. I think my generation, that's not really true. Pretty much, like, all of us, I would say, like, half of us, out of us cousins, graduated with, like, above a 3.0, and then, like, the other half, yeah, they kind of didn't do too well. But then, like, the generation before mine, like my mom, my aunt, and then like even before that, like those people, like half of my family from my grandma's generation never even graduated, which I guess was kind of common for the time. But then like after that, as it became more common and stuff, like in the 80s and 90s, a lot of people in my family just didn't really take school very seriously. And so the fact that I did take school seriously, and, you know, I wound up going to college, my mental health and everything caused me to not do so well, and so I had to drop out, and I probably won't be able to go back for a while, and when I do go back, I'll probably have to go to a technical college instead of a university, or, well, like, you know, a regular university. I'm not sure exactly how to phrase that, but, and that, like, the fact that I had drive compared to the rest of my family, I just sort of started to believe that other people didn't have as much ambition as me. And then when I met other people who like very clearly had as much ambition as me, or even more, I would just greatly admire them. But I also felt like I could judge that when I can't. Like, I don't know who's done what in their life. And so that in itself is like a narcissistic tendency, because like I don't know who actually has ambition and who doesn't. I just felt like I could tell because I would compare people to me. And then if people were like me, I would, you know, think that I guess they had better qualities. And if people didn't remind me of myself, I would maybe kind of think that they must be sort of like my family. And I never really thought about it until I really looked into what narcissism is a couple years ago. And these are just kind of like thoughts that I've had over the course of time. And now I'm at a point where I understand that other people are different, but that doesn't mean that their qualities are any worse. And things that I don't know about other people and that I can't see, I can't assume. I can't assume that I just know everything about a person. But I think it makes sense for a young child or a young person to develop the way that I developed in the circumstances and the environment that I did. And I don't want to be a narcissist. Like, I don't think that anyone wants to be like narcissistic. But I mean, I guess I have some narcissistic qualities, but then I honestly just don't feel that bad about it. Like, when I am being a bit self-absorbed or whatever, I feel like I can usually catch myself and kind of dial it back. And if other people call me out or whatever, I feel like I am pretty good about taking the criticism and not taking it personally, but just taking it as, you know, a helpful suggestion, basically, or feedback. And One thing I just kind of thought of too was, I believe it's because I was the oldest out of 3. And I do have an older half sister from my father, but I don't really have a relationship with her. We didn't really connect until after we were both adults. And anyway, I was often treated like my needs and my wants didn't matter as much as my younger siblings, but also like the other adult, like not other adults, but like my mom, my aunt, my grandma, my grandpa. If they were letting us pick as the kids or as the children, it was always my sis. Like, if we agreed, then yeah, I kind of got to pick, but my sister's choices always overrode mine. They were always treated as like kind of their priority because they were younger. And then when they weren't doing it like that, then, you know, it was about the adults. We're not focused on the kids right now, we're focused on the adults. And so I was treated just kind of poorly, to be honest, especially compared to my siblings and stuff. I was treated sort of like, it made me feel less than a lot. And because I was treated so inconsiderately by my family so consistently, I kind of developed a mentality that I didn't have to be considerate towards other people either. And so when I had a roommate in my dorm at my first year in college, there were times where I reflect and I was a bit rude because I wasn't the most considerate. I made a few phone calls that about like very personal things where it's like I probably should have stepped out of the room. But in my head I was like, this is my space, even though he's in here. Like, this is my home, so I should be allowed to talk freely on the phone. And so he got uncomfortable and he left a couple times. And now that I'm a bit more mature and I'm older, like, I look back and I'm like, I probably should have been the one to have just taken it on myself to have left, because I knew that those conversations were going to be uncomfortable for me, but especially for him to have to sit there and listen to. And so, yeah, I was a bit inconsiderate. And I think it was because of like some narcissistic qualities. And I reached out to him and I apologized to him for it. Like a year after we had been roommates, and he was like, it's all water under the bridge, don't worry about it. And we talked briefly and we just kind of wished each other a successful life and path. And then we talked again like another year later. And he's a high school teacher now, and he has accomplished what he wanted to accomplish. Oh, sorry, I have to stretch. And I am a dropout, a college dropout, but, I've found a path that I like. I have this hobby, and then I also have a job, and I'm currently looking for a second part-time job because I'm working about 25 hours a week right now. And so I want to add maybe another 10 hours a week, even another like 20 hours a week. I think I can handle it, honestly. And even though I at one point, you know, was inconsiderate towards other people because of that sort of mentality, I've grown. And I don't think that people have to have their narcissistic tendencies or their narcissistic qualities for their entire life. I think it can be worked on. I think narcissistic personality disorder is sort of similar to BPD or borderline personality disorder, and I honestly could see them getting kind of mixed up. And the same way that BPD is sort of like, it is a real diagnosis and it is a real condition. And it is like a long-term condition, but BPD can be improved and you can eventually sort of like be treated to the point where you don't really have BPD anymore. And I kind of believe that the same can be done with narcissistic personality disorder. I think that if you get to the root of the problem, or if you get to the root of what's causing it, I really think that inner growth and inner work can be done to change things. And I really feel like I am a pretty good example of that because I am not a perfect person. And I still, like, definitely, I'm probably a bit not as... There are probably things that I am not aware of. But because I'm willing to have that self-awareness and I'm willing to be open to learning about myself and learning about things that I might need to work on. If there are things that I don't know about myself, hopefully I'll learn eventually. And I just kind of wanted to talk about that because I see a lot of people demonize those kinds of behaviors. And obviously, yeah, they can cause problems and they can hurt. And narcissistic qualities are something that should be kind of worked on. They should be given attention, but I just don't think that a person should be written off completely just because they display some of those qualities or some of those tendencies. And like I said, I think just trying to get to the root of the issue and like understanding why someone acts that way can be very helpful. For them and for the people around them. And I think, I mean, that's been true in my life. Like, I've talked to TJ a lot, and TJ's had to deal with a lot from me, and, I think, you know, getting to the root of why helps a lot. So, anyway, I am gonna go, and I appreciate you for watching. I'm not gonna edit. I'm lazy. She was pretty, so like, and she wasn't really like looking or anything, so I don't really feel like trying to remember what I was saying and everything. I think it'll be fine, so I'm just gonna leave that in. Anyway, I have a sore throat from talking for so long, and I don't have any water or anything, so I'm gonna go. And I appreciate you listening to my whatever this is. Some people would be like my TED Talk, but it's not really, doesn't really follow the TED Talk format or anything. To me, this didn't sound like a TED Talk, but maybe. Thank you for coming to my lecture, because I'm intelligent enough to give a lecture. I'm qualified for that. Thank you for listening to what I had to say. And, I hope you have a good one. Take care.